So I'm going to go over some things in Photoshop to prepare you for your framing assignment. I've opened up a picture that I had taken with my camera and put together in Photoshop, and it was saved on my computer. So in Photoshop, I had just gone to File, Open, and browsed for my image. Now this image is quite large. I'm viewing it at 25% here, so that's a lot larger than I'd like. The first thing I want you to do is to crop it down, and we did this in week 1 exercise. But as a review, I'm going to take my crop tool, and I'm going to go up to my options bar and put in 6 inches, 6 inches with a resolution of 72. And I'm going to make a crop of the part of the image that I want to keep. And now to commit to that crop, I could also, if I wasn't sure about that, I can move my crop around. This is just preliminary. And I'm going to go up to my options bar and click on the check mark. Now my image looks very small, but I'm still viewing it at 25%. So I'm going to take my zoom tool, magnifying glass that's at the end of your toolbar, and click multiple times into my image until it says 100% up here. So now this is the image that I'm actually working with, and this is the size that you would submit it. In my layers panel, I'm going to unlock my background, and that is so I can change the size of my image. If it's locked, I can't make it smaller or larger. Now that it's unlocked, I want to talk briefly about making this image into converting it for a smart filter. If I try to make my image right now smaller, I'm going to go, to Edit, Transform, Scale. Make my image smaller. I'm going to commit to it by clicking in it. And now I decide I want to make it larger. Look at what has happened to the quality of my picture. It's completely blurry now. So once you make something smaller, you can't really make it larger. I'm going to go into my History panel. If you don't have your History panel open, you can just go to Window and find History. History panel records the last 25 steps. And I'm going to go back to the step to the step crop. And so what I'm going to do this time, I have to unlock it again, is I'm going to go up to Filter and choose Convert for Smart Filters. And it gives me a message, and I'm going to click OK. And what this does is it doesn't actually officially make my picture smaller. When I make it smaller, it's kind of always keeps the original picture. And that way, when I make my image smaller, and if I decide I want to make it larger, again, I'm not losing quality. The other thing that I had you do in your worksheet was to save this as original. And then for every version that you're going to do, open up your original and start from that one. So now that I've converted this into a smart filter, I can now go to Edit, Transform, Scale, and the keyboard shortcut for this is Control T. And I get the bounding box of the anchors, and I'm going to hold my Shift key down. So this is the first step. I can start with not using a full bleed, and I can have margins. And just like in Illustrator, I can go to View and put down rulers, and I can create guides, and I can also have a grid, also found under View. So it's pretty much the same concept. So if I am going to start working with margins, I would definitely want to have some alignment going on here, and working with my guides and rulers and possibly grids as well. The transparent background, by the way, in Photoshop the checkerboard represents transparency. If it really bothered me, I could create another layer and put a solid color on it. But once you save this as a JPEG, it's going to go automatically to white, so don't worry about that too much. So I can experiment with having a small margin on the bottom, so on and so forth. I'm still in this transformation mode. Once I'm happy with the size of my image, I'm going to go up to the options bar and click on the check mark. And now to move this image around further, I'm going to take my Move tool, and that allows me to move it around. One thing I really suggest when you're working with Photoshop is with your Move tool, go to the options bar and click on where it says Auto Select. Because once I have several layers going on here in Photoshop, if I have Auto Select on, it will, and I use my Move tool, whichever object I click on, it's going to select the correct layer for me, which is very useful. Now I'm going to add some text, and I'm going to take my text tool and click into my document. And actually, I've already copied the quote and so I just need to paste it, Control V, but I don't want it to be red. So I'm going to select it and go up to my options bar, and I don't know, maybe I'll try white to start with, and try a larger font. And I definitely could play with the font family. So this is kind of my starting point. I have to commit to this, same way I did with my transformation. Click on the check mark, and I can take my move tool and I can move this around. And I can start experimenting to see how these two are interacting. Let's say I wanted to create a box though. I wanted to frame the text within itself. A couple of different ways you can do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my layers panel, create a new blank layer, and then I'm going to go to my selection tool, and I'm going to make a selection the size of the box that I want, so a little bit larger than my quote. And I'm going to pick a color, so let's say I want that color to be black. And what I did is I clicked on the top box here, and I'm going to get my color picker. This works in two ways. I have a slider here that gives me all the different hues, and then I have the colors I can choose from in here. So I have to click into a color here and then click OK. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill my selection with this color, which is black. And you could use the paint bucket tool, which is embedded with the gradient tool, or the keyboard shortcut, which is Alt Backspace. Now I just covered up my text because in my layers panel, layer 1, the box, is on top of the text one. So I need to switch that layer order. And now I have my text, which is white, on top of. So if I wanted to move it around, it's a good thing I have that auto select on, so I can just click on whichever layer I want and move the two things. Now sometimes it can be a little tricky trying to get my text, and it grabbed the background. So sometimes you want to turn auto select off. You can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard, and if you want, for just moving things around. So let's say if I want to try making this box larger, I'm going to click on the layer to select that box, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control T, or you can go to Edit. I'm going to cannot transform the selected pixels because the selected area is empty. I have some sort of, I just did Control D. I had some kind of selection there. So I'm going to do that again, Control T, and I can now make my box larger. I wanted to experiment with that, but if I wanted to make my text larger, I'm going to go into my layers panel. I need to commit to that transformation. Go into my layers panel, click on the T, double click it, and it selects all my text. And go up to the options bar and choose a larger font size. That's a bit too large. Commit to it. Everything that you do in Photoshop, you have to commit. So if I make something larger, if I add text, anything I do, I always have to go to the options bar and click either the check mark or the cancel button before you can go on. So I can experiment to see if I had a full bleed with my text here and the image smaller, and I can just continue. So now if I want to see, well, what if my image was larger, and make that larger again, or with a smaller margin, and then try experimenting moving the box down, or not having a box, or putting the text to the side, or putting the text in a very small area. Okay, so these are just some basic elements of Photoshop to get you started. Cropping down your image, unlocking your background, converting it into a smart filter so that way you can make your image smaller or larger without losing quality of the size. That only is important for a photograph. It's not important for the text or for the solid color. Adding your text is pretty simple. Just using the text tool, clicking and typing in. To select the text and change it, double click the T in the layers and go to your options bar where you can choose your color and your font family and your font size. And to move objects, you're going to use the move tool.